welcome to another Sales Hacker webinar. As always, my name is Scott Barker, and I will be moderating this chat for the next 45 minutes to an hour. Appreciate you hanging out with us. I know we're all super busy, got to close deals, get out there and make it happen. So we appreciate you joining us. I'm really excited for this chat. Leading up to this, we did a few planning calls, and I think this is going to be a really good one. So what we're talking about is customer success. So a little bit outside the realm of what we usually talk about on Sales Hacker, but why we're going to be talking about it is because we believe it's going to be the new sales frontier and go through this sort of renaissance that we saw sales development go through, I'd say 5 years ago now. And we've got the right people on this webinar to talk about it. So without further ado, I want to introduce my awesome two guests. First, Trish Bertuzzi, who is the founder and the CEO of the Bridge Group, wrote one of my favorite sales books of all time, the Sales Development Playbook. So Trish, welcome.
Thank you. Love this topic. Super excited.
I'm pumped. And I know you got to have a lot of ideas on this topic, and excited to pick that brain. So, and then last but not least, of course, we have Natalie Severino, who is the VP of Marketing over at Chorus.ai, and also a good friend of mine. So, Natalie, thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm really excited for this topic. I think I think we've got some interesting stuff to talk about. So I appreciate both of you.
Awesome. And we'll skip this last guy and dive right into it here. So here's our agenda for today. And before I dive into this, just super quick housekeeping items. Of course, if you've ever been on a Sales Hacker webinar, we do these for the community. So if you have a question, please do jump in. There's a little Q&A section at the bottom. So if you have any relevant questions, we would love to answer them. We're actually going to have a little Q&A section at the end. And if there's some really burning relevant questions that you're asking throughout, I might pepper them in as well. And then last thing is we always record these. So without a doubt, every webinar we do, I get about 5 or 6 emails after the fact asking for the recording. Do not worry. It is coming. Sometimes it takes about 24 hours, but you're going to have it in your inbox for sure. But here's our agenda for today. We're going to break it down. First, what CS roles actually look like today, because they are evolving. The roles, the responsibilities, kind of who to hire, who to look for. And then we're going to dive into the sales to CS handoff. Super important. Can't have any balls being dropped at this juncture. Talk about a little bit about onboarding and coaching customer success. And then how are we actually measuring it, which I think is super interesting. And we're going to get the audience involved in this. It's how are you measuring it? Because I think it means people are measuring a million different things across different organizations. So that's going to be the agenda. So let's dive into it. So this is crazy to me. This is something that when we were planning this, we all know this, but it's somehow, I'm a sales guy, I lose sight of this all the time. And for some reason, it seems that organizations always lose sight of this. Trish, why do you think so many companies have gone, net new logo crazy? Why are people forgetting this?
Because they're mostly measured on net new, right? So the measuring stick is always how many new customers have you acquired? Yes, we talk about attrition, churn, those types of things, but we are laser focused on net new. We spend tens of thousands of dollars on marketing, on our tech stack, on data, on training, and it's always about chasing those new logo dollars. It's, not that I don't love it. Who doesn't love new logo selling? But, it's an expensive proposition.
Yeah, totally. It's almost like, that always chasing that shiny new object. And everyone likes shiny new things, but sometimes, the things you already own, building upon those can be even better and more fulfilling and more profitable. So Natalie, would love your thoughts on this too. At Chorus, how do you keep this top of mind?
Well, I think one of the things that Trish said actually rings so true to me as our head of marketing and our head of our BDR teams. We do tend to get very focused on new logo growth. And I think that the measurement part is part of what drives that. And from a sales and marketing organization, those are the things that we're most likely measured on. And those are also very goal-oriented parts of the organization. And the reality is that I think it actually takes the entire organization to be focused on how you retain customers, whether you're talking about product and engineering or you're talking about a customer success team and how that customer success team is being supported. That has to be driven throughout the entire organization.
Yeah, I agree. And we've got a great question, which I'm going to go to right now because it's a funny one. Daniel, thank you for the question. Daniel goes, I'm just wondering, how would you have a webinar to talk about customer success without having a bunch of customer success? Which is a fantastic question. And Daniel, I hope at the end of this call, you understand why. So me, partnerships, sales guy, Trish, sales development, sales leader, and Natalie, marketing. And this is actually a conscious decision not to have CS leaders. We definitely could have brought in VPs of CS. But as you're going to see as we go through this webinar, this is us trying to take a new spin on customer success and where we see or believe the future of CS is going to lie. So give me your thoughts at the end of this, Daniel.
Yeah, and first of all, Daniel, that was a fantastic question, so thank you for that. But the other part is, CS leaders have a view of their organization. I think, at the Bridge Group, we have 30 to 35 active clients at any point in time. So I have a view, sort of a broader view of the market on what's going on in CS, and there's a lot going on there, right? And then Natalie has a very, very distinct view too across their customer base. So great question. Next webinar, if you're a CS rep, let's make sure, Scott, we get him on there because he bellied up to the bar and asked a hard question right out of the gate.
I love it. And trust me, we have had many, many CS leaders on Sales Hacker before. But okay, well, let's start by defining it. What does customer success mean to us? Because if we had CS leaders, we'd probably get a very similar answer. So I'm very curious, and this is the one thing we didn't really go into too much. Trish, what is your definition of customer success?
I don't have a definition of customer success, and neither does the market, and therein lies the problem, right? So years ago, everybody would talk about inside sales, and they meant all different kinds of things. They meant sales development, they meant AEs, they meant account management, they meant anything that fell under this umbrella, all different goals and objectives, roles and responsibilities, it all fell under inside sales.
Yeah.
Same thing's happening with customer success. I would love the market to start to move towards a tighter definition, and I think it is, but for right now, you talk to 10 companies, you're probably going to get 6 different answers.
Yeah. Agreed. And Natalie, right before I get your take on this, we've got our audience is killing it today for sure. I love this answer. I think so. Mark Ramsey, thank you. Goes, the customer defines customer success. That's a pretty good one.
Love that.
I like that one a lot.
I love it.
Yeah.
But that means customer success, the emotion or the objective. What it doesn't mean is the organizational structure. So it's a great answer, and it should be incorporated into everyone's strategy.
Yeah.
It's just a different answer to a different question.
Yeah.
I agree with Trish on this. And I think, and we're going to get into this a little bit more, but, there is a real, and why this ties into sales is that there is a real kind of dividing point where some organizations are just very focused on making sure that their customer success teams are really deep in with customers and providing that great experience, being very consultative. And then other organizations are asking customer success teams to carry a number, and not just a renewal number, but an expansion number or a cross-sell number. And therein lies the difference. It's a different skill set. And I think that's part of what we want to talk to you all about on this webinar.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Would agree. And mine is probably a bit of a traditional answer, but how I would define it is getting the customer to have more than they actually expected in hopes that that is going to increase the lifetime value of said customer. So I'm thinking it's their job to almost this above and beyond approach in hopes that that is going to grow the lifetime value over time. And we've got some more great questions. Keep the questions coming, but let's move on to one of the key things, which is, reducing churn, driving growth. This has, I think, been top of mind in CS orgs for a long time. But Natalie, do you want to run through some of these stats we have here?
Yeah. So, in looking across different organizations, people have been reporting out on numbers. And what we've heard is that kind of in that very best SaaS company space, it's the 7% annual churn is the average. And yet the median is really more like 10%. I thought it was interesting that McKinsey was talking about the fact that when you go up market and you've got that higher ACV, people are less likely to switch. And I think that makes a ton of sense too, because, when you're getting into that bigger contract, you're going through a more rigorous review process. You might be looking at a proof of concept. You've got more data that's involved, more integrations that are involved. It's harder for them to switch at the end of the day, although I don't think that means you can take it for granted that they won't if you're not servicing them well. What do you think, Trish?
Oh, I completely agree with what you said. I think, it makes sense. Larger ACV, more pain to switch. In a lot of the SaaS space, it is relatively painless to go from one solution to the next. So it's a yin and a yang between vendors, and that's what's causing some amount of churn.
Yeah, I would agree. It's like when you're playing with the smaller SMB deals, it's there's just so many options out there. And I think we had an interesting point on this, if I remember correctly, when we were speaking earlier, is people have been kind of conditioned to act as if they're in the B2C world, right? It's when you're out in B2C, you have 400 different toothbrushes you could buy. And so you don't really care if you buy this or this one. There's no brand loyalty. You just want your pain and your challenges solved by that thing. And the minute it doesn't do it, I'm gone. And people are bringing that attitude now into B2B in a lot of different areas, and this is one of them. Is that a fair comparison to me?
I think that's a fabulous comparison and well said.
Awesome. So great. Let's move on then to the next thing here, which equally as important is this idea of kind of being the first point of contact. Like, you are going to be the one providing consistent communication and support. And Natalie, do you want to run through these stats that highlight how important this truly is?
Yeah, so HubSpot had an interesting article that was talking about the fact that 66% of the customers say that this consistent and relevant communication is a key factor when you're making the buying decision. So I think part of my takeaway from all of that is that, it's important for you to surface aspects of how you're going to be supporting the customer while you're actually going through the sales motion. And it may even make sense to introduce people who are going to be part of that support process after the sale during that process. Mm-hmm. And they've also said that, a bad experience can actually be driven by the fact that when they get new people involved in the process, they don't actually know why they're buying, what they're trying to solve, what their business problems are, why they're engaged with all of you. And having to go through that process of explaining it over and over again is just not a great experience. And it's something that we need to be mindful of, is how are we preparing the customer success team to really knock it out of the park with the client?
Yeah, I would agree. I know as a buyer, when I put my buyer hat on, there's nothing more frustrating than having maybe a discovery with the BDR, and then I get passed over to an AE, and we go over the same thing. Maybe he or she will hit on like 2 points just to like prove that he did look at the notes or she did look at the notes, but then miss a whole bunch. And then once you actually get there, usually it's like you're starting from scratch again, which can be extremely, extremely frustrating. Trish, what are some ways we can stop that from happening?
Well, that's a process and a training issue, number one, that just like AE to customer success handoff is critical, so is SDR, BDR to AE, but so that's sort of a different topic. But I think that's definitely a process issue. But I think customer success is a great place for conversational intelligence tools, right? So tools like Chorus and that product category. I mean, if you record every sales call, and you should schedule sales calls, and then you close a deal, that set of recordings should be passed off to the customer success rep, so they hear the voice of the customer, they understand the language they use, what objections they gave you, how you position the competition against them, what parts of the product they're interested in. I mean, all the notes in the world don't convey what conversations do. So I think, the next frontier, and it's already begun for these types of tools, is in the sales to customer success handoff, and then in customer success itself.
Yeah, totally agree, for sure. I know is something that I often used even before conversational intelligence was around, was just like call recordings, and because it brings you right back to that moment. Like you remember the tonality, like were they upbeat, were they a little more monotone, because you don't want to come in with all this energy if maybe they're not quite as energetic. And even specific language they would use, it was so helpful for me early in my career. Okay, so one thing I actually forgot, I wanted to do this poll at the beginning. So audience, you're getting involved here. So when we were preparing, we were super curious to hear what the community and the audience, what is the number one metric, and I'll put this poll up right now. What is the number one metric you use to measure the success of your CS organization? So if you're in CS, what do you get measured on? What's like the number one thing? If you're a CS leader, what is that? Or if you're an AE, do your best to answer this question. All right, let's launch this, and we'll give you 10 seconds or so. Interesting. I want this to keep going because we're getting some really good engagement. Okay, so 3, 2, 1, and I am going to end the poll. Okay, this is interesting to me. So what's the number one metric you use to measure the success of your CS organization? 18% said cross-sell and upsell. That's the number one. 57% said renewals and churn. 27% said customer experience. And then only 9% said successful implementations. Trish, does that surprise you at all?
Yes. It surprises me on the one hand and thrills me on the other, because it is a new frontier for revenue. I guess I'm a little surprised that more focus isn't put on the experience and implementation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I am a little bit surprised at that. Not that it isn't, because we asked them a very specific question. What is your primary metric? I'm sure there are other metrics there, but yeah, so we're still looking for revenue.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Natalie, does this surprise you?
Yes and no. I think on the implementation side, that number being low doesn't surprise me. I think, in some organizations that are a little bit more mature, they may have a dedicated implementation team. I've seen that in the past, but it's maybe not as common, which we're going to talk about structure side. I actually thought that it was interesting that the cross-sell upsell was as high as it was. I probably anticipated the renewal churn number being even higher than what it was, actually.
Yeah.
But to your earlier point, Trish, there is no common definition of what does customer success mean. So this is just proving that point exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, the top three there, the split between 18, 57, 27, we're kind of all over the map a little bit. All right, let's move on here in the presentation and talk about another job, which is offering competitive differentiation. And Natalie, can you run through these stats again? Because these are some cool ones.
Yeah, so Deloitte reported that 62% of customers believe that customer experience is a competitive differentiator. And a little bit more controversial, and I can't wait for Trish to dive into this one, but 86% said that they were willing to pay up to 25% more for a better customer experience. So, Trish, how do you respond to that?
Well, on the Deloitte, completely agree. On the right now, come on, really? You're not going to pay 25% more. And if they said it, they just lied. They lied. You know what? And they shouldn't have to pay more for a great customer experience. Fantastic customer experience should be table stakes. If you're getting a fair fee for your product or service, customer experience should be table stakes. I'm sorry, you know that this stat just made me crazy because there's no way. And by the way, how do you know pre-sale what your experience is going to be post-sale? Sure, I'm going to tell you. We'll give you a foot massage, manicure, whatever. No, they're not going to pay more. No, sorry. Yeah. That one made me crazy.
Yeah, that one, I've seen people claim that that's why they're going with, one company A over company B, for the better customer experience. I guess it really depends on the definition of customer experience. Like, where does that start? Where does that end?
That is a great point. That's a great point, because does the customer experience start, and maybe I'm wrong and I'm interpreting it, does it start in the sales process?
Yeah. Right. I think if you do start it there, then that's more likely, because then they've had an easy buying process. They're more comfortable with you as an organization. You're clearly a more optimized organization, so they're more comfortable paying that extra little bit because they think overall it's going to lead them to more success.
So they'd pay more for a better experience.
Yeah. From start to finish.
I think on some level, especially when you're talking about, software or even just tech in general, that there tends to be a lot of perceived risk in making the decision. You're signing a contract, you're locking yourself in for a year most of the time. And so how do you know that you're making the right choice, that you're finding the right partner, the partner that's not just selling you shelfware, but actually is going to help make sure that you get the value out of it that you need? And so in some ways, I feel like this is pointing to that, about wanting to have that, almost that warm, fuzzy feeling like, I know that when I buy this, I'm at the end of the day going to get the result that I was looking for, because the team that's servicing my business is going to help make sure that that happens.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. And I think it's like the old saying, how you do anything is how you do everything. So if I have a good experience from start to finish with the company, I'm like, they'll probably be able to innovate faster. They're going to move quicker. They're going to eventually beat their competition. So if I'm paying 25% more now, it's probably worth it in the long run. But
yeah.
Let's quickly go to, we have a question here. And Natalie, I'd love your opinion on this. At what stage of a company does it make sense to introduce a CS team? What revenue range?
I think in some ways that's a loaded question in the sense that, I think that there is an expectation, as Trish mentioned, about table stakes around, is it going to be an intuitive product to use? Am I going to be able to be successful with it out of the gate? And am I going to get the support that I need? And so it depends on, in some ways, how complex of a product are you selling? How complex is it going to be for them to implement it and use it on the other side? I mean, in some ways, I don't think you should launch a product without having customer success, but it really depends on the context from my point of view. Mm-hmm. What do you guys think?
Trish, what's your take on that one?
No, I totally agree. Mm-hmm. I mean, I think, well, first of all, define customer success. We're going to go right back to the first question. Mm-hmm. What do you mean by customer success? So you're talking about experience, implementation, renewals, incremental revenue. I think it's really hard to say, and I think it really depends on a whole set of variables about ease of use. Yeah. There's a whole set of variables, so it's hard to say.
Yeah, I agree.
And you know what, if you're starting up a new company and it's a brand new product and you're the CEO, you're customer success.
Yeah, exactly.
So.
Yeah. Or if you're even a rep who sold it, you could argue you're on the hook to be CS if you don't have CS. So all great points there. Okay, let's shift gears a little bit and go into a day in the life. What does a day in the life of a customer success manager look like? Because in most roles and functions, there's a lot going on here. There's a lot of moving parts when you look across organizations and what most individuals own. This is a lot. Trish, do you want to kind of walk us through this slide here?
Well, this is crazy, right? So if you look at, this is when it's a schmeld, right? This is a day in the life of a customer success rep where there has not been any role specialization, right? Their organization hasn't matured to that level yet because they're doing it all. They're doing experience, they're doing implementation, they're doing retention, they're doing sales. So it's really hard to whip hats on and off all day long. And a lot of these really require completely different sets of skills. And at the end of the day, have different goals and objectives. So I think this day in the life of a CSM is schizophrenic, for lack of a better term. Yeah.
I agree. And Trish, you draw these great parallels between, where inside sales was before we split into BDRs and account executives. And it looked something like this. You had all of these different tasks, and how are you going to get to all of them? It was crazy. And then we saw the specialization happen, and everyone became way, way more efficient. So and Natalie, maybe I'll flip this one over to you. How do you see you could split some of these tasks up to have them a more focused approach?
Well, I think that the point that Trish is driving towards is that there's different skill sets involved here. And so, it's very difficult to be masterful at all things. Like if you're talking about onboarding, maybe that's something that's very technical. Maybe you're integrating systems. Whereas if you're really doing account management or you're trying to do upsell and cross-sell, you need to be adept at, building a business case and doing pricing negotiation. And those are very different people typically from what is my superpower? What am I really good at? And so I think from our earlier conversation, it comes back to what is your customer success team solving for? And then how do you align people in ways that really match with the skills that they bring to the table? That would be my worry looking at this as being one person owning it end to end. And again, it comes down to context of what are you selling? How complex is it? How technical is it? And then if you are asking people to own, the whole thing from giving the ongoing day-to-day support and consulting from a success perspective and doing things like upsell, cross-sell, then you have to know that before you hire that person and look for somebody that can actually handle all of those things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, which would be a very difficult hire, I think. Someone who could handle all these things and not just handle them, but it's also about handling them right? It's what are you going to prioritize? Because you'll have to do that. You have to be, okay, here are the two things we care the most of, and the other four, you're going to have to be okay with them sliding down a little bit as an organization. Okay, so that's a day in the life. Let's talk a little bit about these two approaches to CS. And we kind of went through this, but Trish, do you want to just hammer this home kind of one more time?
So once again, there's two approaches. So there's, sales, success, support, where, everyone has very distinct functional areas and there's a great handoff. And then as organizations mature, they do tend to go to sort of the hunter-farmer model, for lack of a better term, right? So the hunters are the person where there are revenue objectives. They're provided with the technologies they need, the training they need, the processes they need to go out and hit a very specific number. Where the farmers are the relationship managers. They're responsible for the onboarding, the implementation, the UX, the feedback, voice of the customer type of thing. They're relationship managers. So it really depends where you are on the spectrum of this as far as which way you're going to go.
Yeah, agreed. Natalie, anything to add there?
No, I think Trish nailed it on the head. I don't think we need to belabor the point.
Curious, Natalie, at Chorus, do you have that split yet?
We're more like the organization on the left, where we've got kind of a team selling approach. We've got people that are focused on support, people that are focused on really consulting with our clients and helping teach them how to do new things. We're in a really new space where the capabilities that our product brings to the table are things that not every organization is good at today. And so our success team is really focused on teaching them and not on, closing unless you're talking about a renewal. We really bring in AEs to work on that side of things so that our success team can be really focused on that teaching aspect.
Yeah, that makes sense for sure. If you're in a market where a lot of education still needs to happen, that's, that has to be priority number one. Yeah, makes sense. All right, let's now move on to this. How do you describe the ideal customer success rep? Going to be a hard question because we went over how many different hats they have to wear. But Trish, I'll start with you.
I'm getting boring. I don't know. What's their job? How do I know how to hire the ideal rep unless I know exactly what they want to, what they're going to be responsible for?
Yeah. Yeah.
Same thing's true of the leader, by the way, is how do you select the best leader for a CS team? Well, you better have a complete understanding of what's going to be under that CS umbrella before you hire that leader. Yeah.
Yeah. Define and then optimize this for exactly what you're going for. I would say at this, after going through this webinar and the state of CS today, I would go and hire like an entrepreneur who can go and do everything, who's run his own business, because there's so many different facets to this. That would be my suggestion. Natalie,
but he would be a failed entrepreneur. Otherwise, he would still have his own business.
True. In between, maybe
in between ventures.
Yeah.
Got it.
Yeah. You got to fail a few times. No one gets it their first shot.
Trust me, been there.
Natalie, what do you at Chorus look for in CS reps?
Well, again, I think Trish made the point, like, you have to be really clear about what you're asking them to solve for and what they're good at. I think one thing in my mind that would be consistent no matter how the job role is spec'd is somebody that is really good at outside-in thinking. It's not what do we want, what are we doing for the customer. It's what is the customer trying to achieve? What do they need? How can I put myself in their shoes? How can I understand their business so that I can kind of become an extension of their team? Because whether or not I need to try and upsell, cross-sell if it's appropriate, if I'm doing that from a place of not really understanding their business and listening to what their needs are, it's not going to work. Or if you're in a position where you're doing more of the teaching and consulting, you have to be able to do that also. So that's kind of table stakes across the board for me.
Yeah. All great points. And if we kind of go to the next slide, we'll see all these elements of, customer experience, which this person that you're hiring would have to be really good at all these things, being available all the time, being reliable, being able to articulate complex things in simple ways, adapting to new environments, being anticipate the customer needs, and then, having that feeling of kind of complete ownership or accountability. So again, hammers home the fact that this is a multifaceted job. So let's move on then to one of our agenda items, which is handoffs. So this one is, there's a lot of mistakes reps make here. What are some of those mistakes reps make when handing off a customer? And Natalie, let's start with you.
I think we touched earlier on this idea of making sure that you actually know what that customer's journey has been, what goals they're solving for, and how they're looking for you to help is first and foremost. And then one of the big ones that drives me crazy is an assumption that somebody is picking up the ball and not following through to make sure that nothing drops through the cracks. Like, a sales rep can't toss it over the fence and assume that somebody else is going to catch it. There needs to be a connection point and an acknowledgement that you've got it now before kind of letting it go, for me. What about you, Trish?
I love what you just said. There has to be an acknowledgement that you've got it before I let it go. I think that sums it up. Have I given you everything you need to know? Have I done everything I can for you so you can make that customer successful? Love that.
Yeah. I think that's awesome as well. And it's deciding how much acknowledgement. Like, is this yours now and you're owning everything? And if there's any blips, it's on you, or which parts of it do you own now and I'm still going to have? And I think that comes from just really strong communication throughout the whole process. So if we go to the next slide, we outline a few here. And Trish, do you want to kind of run through these tips?
Yeah, so it's about, there has to be a process. There has to be a handoff process. You can't let your teams wing it. That's a recipe for disaster, but you can't overcomplicate the process. You want to make sure the voice of the customer is heard, meaning, that it is about them. Natalie, you said this really well a little while ago. It has to be someone who's thinking outside in. It's about the customer and what they're trying to accomplish in their business, not what we're trying to do in our business. And then the shared culture of success, I think, is critical. And we talked about this in one of our pre-works for this webinar. I think there should be a metric for sales reps that are tied to attrition. Like customer success is measured on attrition. I say a new sales metric should be at the individual rep level, what is their attrition rate? Mm-hmm. So if the average is 7% and most of your team falls there, but you have 2 reps where their attrition rate tends to be double or triple, you have a sales issue you need to get addressed. So I'm all for bringing that particular metric out of customer success. Well, not leaving customer success, but adding it to the metrics by which we measure our AEs.
Mm-hmm. Such a fantastic point, because that could be all of your customer success metrics could be wrong. All your churn could be off. You could think that you have a bad CS rep when they actually started in the sales process. You could have, someone who's bringing in a ton of net new logos, and he's getting over here, he or she's getting cheered, and they're the greatest in the organization. But then as it goes down, every CS rep that has to deal with his accounts is pulling their hair out, and they eventually leave.
And the CS reps, they know who that rep or reps are. They totally know who those are. And probably feel bad for the customers.
I bet. Yeah, it's super. Have you ever heard of, Natalie, have you heard of any organizations tracking that attrition rate by rep?
I haven't. I mean, the closest thing that I've heard of is, making sure that there's a clawback in commissions if, somebody hasn't actually earned the right to the business and sold them something that somebody needed. If it was a missed sale, then there's some sort of penalty at the end. But I love the idea of tracking it, because I think metrics creates goals that the organization rallies around. And that's one of the things on this last point about creating this shared culture of success. I think that has to start from the tops down and permeate throughout the whole organization. And, I personally have worked for several organizations that really employ measuring Net Promoter, and they do it not just on product, but throughout the whole organization, whether it's on content or communications or customer success. Everything gets measured around that idea of customer delight, and it makes a huge difference.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I like that. And that's all about this, creating this shared culture of success where you're winning as a team is so unbelievably important, which is what we're going to get to next. But quickly before we do that, we have a anonymous attendee writing a clarifying question. Is attrition rate just another word for churn? So what we're saying is it is, but we would look at churn is always relegated to the CS org right now. I think the point, Trish, you were trying to make is we should not just have it live there. We should also bring it down funnel to the sales org as well to make sure that we're watching the attrition rate of each rep. And then that in terms is going to help CS do their job better. Is that correct, Trish?
Yeah, I probably misspoke. I should have used the word churn.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah, so I was using them interchangeably, so I apologize.
Yeah. Okay, let's talk. We've got about 15 minutes. Got some great questions, but let's talk about this because it's unbelievably important. How have you fostered a shared culture of success? And Natalie, I'll go with this with Chorus because I know you guys do this extremely well.
Yeah. Well, I think we are an organization that's measuring Net Promoter. I've worked for others that do too, but it's a number that we look at every single month. I think, there are some organizations that also do some interesting things like shared incentives around Net Promoter where, maybe there's a company-wide bonus that's tied to how well you're servicing the customer. And that really points to the fact that it's across the whole organization. But everything that we do as a company at Chorus is talking about the customer, how we're servicing them, what their needs are, and it's something that's driven tops down in our organization. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I know
it has to be.
From talking to yourself and talking to Roy, you really put an onus on this culture of success, but also this kind of coaching culture, which is so if we can go to the next slide, so getting, I think, maybe did we get? Okay.
We'll just we'll skip ahead since we're running out of time.
Perfect. So the elements of a successful coaching culture. So I want to talk about this one because, again, Chorus does this so well. How do you kind of think about this at Chorus?
So I think for me, one of the things that's super important is instilling this idea of everyone can always improve and everyone can always get better, and feedback is a gift, and getting feedback is a safe thing. And so it's not about you're doing something wrong. It's let me help you get better because it's going to make you more successful. It's going to make our customers more successful, and then translating that into specific deliberate practices around improvement. So are you bringing things like a recording of the call of when you were dealing with a customer and you need help to a one-on-one? Are you running film reviews? How are you instilling that in everyone in the organization that that coaching is great. It's something that you should ask for. It's something that you should want. It's an investment in you.
Yeah, I agree. Having no shame around not knowing something. It should be just fully, I'm trying to get better. Here's what we're doing. And Trish, would love, because I know, the Bridge Group creates this coaching culture with hundreds and hundreds of organizations. What do you see successful orgs doing that keeps this going for the long term?
So it can't be a drive-by event. It can't be an occasional event. I think managers have to be taught how to coach. It's not intuitive. Good coaching is not intuitive. It's really hard work, right? So I think we have to invest in making sure our managers know how to coach. We have to give them KPIs around coaching. And here's the big one, we have to give them the freedom to make that investment in time to coach. So I'm sure there's a board meeting coming up and you need 4 slides for its stat. But if that's taking away from one-on-one time with the manager and their reps, you got to rethink that. If you're going to talk about it being a priority, you actually have to make it a priority.
Mm-hmm.
Love that.
Agreed. And moving on to the next slide here, go through. So here's a couple other kind of ways that we talked about. So manager-led, have it self-paced, peer-to-peer. I love this one. I can feel people don't get quite as scared when it's peer-to-peer. Sometimes they get more scared depending on the person, actually. And groups. I like this one a lot. This has been incredibly important in my career. Without constant coaching, I'm not sure where I would be. So Natalie, any specifics you do at Chorus, like for peer-to-peer, for example?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's a variety of things. We actually have created buddy systems for people to go and listen and comment on each other's calls. We have an optional voluntary weekly film review where we encourage people to come to the film review with calls that they want to get feedback on from their peers and from our VP of sales. We also strongly encourage, as you might imagine, listening to calls around, what are the top reps doing? And we've seen, some customers where that's as far as they've taken it. We're out and we're teaching them around, how do you do this manager-led? How do you do film review? How do you do all of these other things? But even the simple act of letting reps, whether it's customer success or sales, listen to each other's calls, where they can see real world practices around how the best reps are handling tough conversations, it's a total game changer.
Mm-hmm. Agreed. And if we go to the next slide, so we dive a little bit more into some examples here. And we had an interesting point about this is taking place in almost every sales organization, or hopefully. Trish, is it fair to say that most sales organizations are doing some sort of call review or coaching?
Yes. I'm not saying they're doing it well, but yes.
Yeah, it's true. Two different things for sure, but they're at least giving it a shot. And we were talking about how it's interesting in the CS side, it's not quite as common, which is so interesting because there's, as we kind of proved throughout this conversation, there's a lot more elements at play, and they're seemingly getting less coaching. Trish, any reason you think that is?
Well, I guess it really depends on how we view their role. I mean, I think for some reason we think sales needs constant skill reinforcement, but when CS, once we hire them, they're good.
Mm-hmm.
It's weird. It's a cultural thing. I'm not sure why.
Yeah. There's just it's seemingly more money spent in sales training than anywhere else, which is
right.
Is it?
Another thing we talked about in our pre-work session was, all right, so how much revenue are you going to get out of new logo? How much revenue are you going to get out of your customer base? Now let's look at those percentages and apply them to the resources across the company. Are they getting equal amounts spent in marketing? Are they getting equal amounts spent in training and coaching and sales development? I mean, I think CSDs, customer sales development reps, are definitely on the rise. So if you look at the revenue percentages, are you doing the math across all the ways that you can invest in those teams? Probably not. It's probably more weighted to new logo.
Yeah.
New logo. I
Great.
forget but you know what I mean.
Great point. Yeah. Why doesn't CS, and I'm sure in some, but why CS should have a marketing budget? Because they need to go, they need to expand. They should keep this idea of account-based marketing shouldn't end at the sale. You should keep it going so that you can break
inbound from the customer.
Yeah, totally. Absolutely. Yeah. And so Natalie, I know you kind of gave me some hope because you are seeing this shift at Chorus, and you're kind of at the forefront of this shift, and more CS teams are kind of waking up to the power of creating this coaching culture. Is a trend that you're seeing?
It's definitely a trend that we're seeing. I think one of the things that we see is that there's often this kind of organic growth that comes within an account. So it starts most times with sales. We've had it actually start with customer success before, but it starts with they're sharing clips of calls with the customer success team so that they can be prepared for the handoff and know what the customer wants. And then a light bulb goes off, and then the customer success leader is looking at it like, well, this would be great for us too. I mean, we're having these conversations. We're having conversations about needs. We're having conversations about what initiatives the customer has. We need to be able to share calls back to the sales team if we're doing a handoff back for them to be able to do an expansion contract if we're, as customer success, not handling the commercials. And so it may not be the starting point, but we're definitely seeing a big trend of it moving in that direction. And, when to your earlier point about, where's the budget and resources being spent, if you're in a recurring revenue business, you probably have much more revenue at stake with your existing base than you do with those new logos that you're chasing. So, don't take it for granted. You've got to invest in making sure that those customers are being well served. And, just because you go into one team at a very large account doesn't mean that you're also not trying to expand within those customers too. So I think not investing in this team and making sure that they're world-class in what they're doing is short-sighted.
Mm-hmm. Couldn't agree more. I feel like the wave is coming, and you either gotta surf it, or you're gonna get left behind for sure. I think this is the next big thing that organizations are going to focus on, and the organizations that do focus on it are going to be the ones that are winning in the future. All right, Natalie, if we want to skip ahead, I'm open to doing a little bit of Q&A if you two are open in the last 5 minutes here. Let's dive into it, because the community has been amazing, really engaged throughout. We've got so many custom questions here, so definitely a topic that's hitting home. Here's one from Guy Lubavitch. Guy, thank you for the question. And Trish, I'll go with you on this one. Do you know of any CS that deals with zero-touch customers, no sales? So that I'm
no, not saying they're not there. I don't have familiarity with those companies.
Yeah. So if I understand it correctly, it's like if someone went through maybe like a self-serve model, bought a something, are people still getting CS from that? I don't know of any. Natalie, do you?
I mean, no, I would think that in that case, it would be more of selling to consumers or very small businesses. I feel like once you start moving up market, there's enough requirements where they generally need to engage with the sales team and have some sort of service, maybe.
Mm-hmm. Trish, the light bulb go off over there?
Oh, can we think of one? Can we think of one? Like, it would be a company that probably gave away its stuff for free.
Mm-hmm.
Like a calendar?
Sure, yeah, there is. But you're almost not getting a CS. You're basically getting a salesperson, because when you do the freemium model, you're getting someone, but they're trying to upsell you to the non-freemium model. So it's kind of CS.
I know, right? Once again, how do you define CS?
Yeah. Like I know.
Question though.
Yeah, Lucidchart does that actually. Lucidchart has a free product that you can download, and then but again, I don't know. Is it a sales rep that's contacting you, or is it CS? I'm not sure.
I'm gonna have to think about it. But Guy, I wrote your name down, and if I think about it, and if I think of someone, I'll reach out to you on LinkedIn.
Yeah. Okay, we got another one from Anonymous. Doesn't like to use his name. How do I broach the conversation with marketing about getting some budget, assuming they're in CS? How do you go about doing that? Natalie, I'll go with you since you are the VP of marketing. If I'm over in CS and I'm trying to get some marketing dollars to support what I'm doing, how do I do it?
Well, I think that it's one of the things that I've been pretty fortunate about throughout my career is being able to unlock budget from different places. I think that it all comes down to making sure that you've got a really compelling business case. What are your goals? How do you want to fulfill the goals? And what do you expect the end result to be? And so then it becomes either we need to go find that new budget, or am I willing to make a trade-off? I myself am working with my customer success team and in the process right now of hiring somebody to be focused on customer marketing, because I agree that it's that important, and I want to put some wood behind that arrow. So I think it's I don't think it's an impossible task to do. I think that you just have to be really, really clear about what your objective is and how you're going to achieve it. Mm-hmm. Make the business case.
Yeah.
That's a fantastic answer. Yep.
Yeah. And Natalie, that's a very good skill to have in your career, being able to find that budget. That's a good one. Yeah. Okay, awesome. Well, that takes us to the hour. Trish, Natalie, thank you so much for hanging out with me. That was a really enjoyable conversation. And for everyone who hung out, thank you for the engagement. That was a lot of fun. And I hope you have an awesome rest of your week.